Yeah, fair life.
Welcome to Cyber Talk with Cyber GRC. Today we'll explore the ISO 27001 journey from zero to certification. Whether you are just a startup or a global enterprise, ISO 27001 remains the gold standard for information security management. Joining me today is Love Johar, a seasoned ISO 27001 certified lead implementator, auditor, and global GRC cybersecurity influencer. He will guide us through how organizations actually certify step by step with real world examples and common pitfalls. So let's begin with our first question. Sir, my first question is, what exactly is ISO 27001 and why should an organization care about it?
It's a very good question to start with, Vidya. What exactly is ISO 27001 all about? So, I started training people on 27001 back in 2016. Okay. So, at that time, the standard was called ISO 27001 2013 version, because at that time, the
Okay.
version that we had was from 2013. But now that the standard out is there, is called 2022 version. Okay. So, it has revised now.
Mm.
Okay. So earlier we had 114 controls. Now we have only 93 controls. Okay. And
Okay.
clauses are almost the same. Okay. Clauses have not changed. So it has been over a decade. I'm training people on ISO 27001. So it is one of my favorite subjects to be really honest about it. And you can ask me any question related to ISO 27001. I would answer you more clearly than ChatGPT and Google. I can assure you that, because I have spent so much time and so much effort in implementation of ISO 27001, in understanding each and every clause of ISO 27001, that I know the in-depth detailing of this particular standard, because at some point of time it was my passion to understand how exactly ISO 27001 works. So yeah, it is one of the most dearest to me in terms of the standard implementations, if you ask. And I love implementation of ISO 27001. Have done so many implementations by now that I really enjoy it from my heart. So yeah, that's about it. And basically, ISO 27001 is the international standard for information security management system, right? So what it does basically, okay, it helps the organization to protect the data. Okay, you protect your confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the information and information assets also. Okay, so this is basically the overview of the standard. Okay, how it happens? It happens through a risk based approach. Okay, it works on a risk based approach. You identify what all risks are there in the organization, and then you manage them, and then you treat them. This is the complete thing, how it works. Why it matters is because for any organization, for example, let's say there is a bank, let's say there is a hospital, let's say there is a tourism industry or any tourism company. When you are dealing with customer data, customers
Mm.
think customers think before giving you their data, because they think that whether this data will be protected by you, will be taken care by you properly or not. This question is answered by ISO 27001. It builds customer trust. It makes people understand that you prove their data security seriously. Okay,
Yeah.
so this is the main reason. Okay, and because of that, definitely it will result into business growth also. Many customers now demand ISO 27001. Okay, in the contracts
Mm.
also, in the initial, if you go for a bid also, for example, if you want to take a contract for any service, right, they will ask you whether you have ISO 27001 or not. So that is also there, right? So that is where it is there. So what the common pitfall I see here in this case is that, Vidya, because we need to check the pitfalls also, right, today in this session.
Yeah.
What are the common mistakes that the organization do? So the common pitfall that I see in this case is basically, I've
Yeah.
seen many organizations, they treat it like a checklist. They treat it like a checkbox. Okay, these are the clauses that we have to implement. These are the controls that we have to implement. This is not a checklist based standard. this is basically a
Hmm,
standard
true.
that should change the culture of the organization. Your culture after the standard implementation should be driven towards information security. That is the end goal of the standard if you implement it properly, right? And this is the right mindset. Okay, the mindset of the organization should change, the culture of the organization should change after the implementation. The organization should start thinking from a risk based perspective. This is a change that should happen after the correct implementation. So it is not only a checkbox based implementation. Okay, it is not a
Hmm.
paper and documentation based work. You need to basically you know, make a shift in the culture of the organization, make a shift in the thinking and approach of the management, how they are basically looking at the risks. So that is one thing that, you know, that you should expect after a correct implementation, I should say.
Okay. Before moving on to our next question, I would like to tell our audience that they can drop their comments, they can drop their questions, whatever query they have. We are here for you, so feel free to ask us question. And let's move on to the next question. What are the main stages of ISO 27001 journey?
So these are the main stages, Vidya, if you see on the screen, right? So we start with gap assessment, right?
Mm-hmm.
We basically understand what is the gap between the current security posture and what are the areas of improvement as per this standard requirement, right? Then we move towards planning and scoping. We define the scope, we define the objective of the ISMS. Okay, then we move
Uh,
towards the risk assessment. Then we identify and analyze the potential risks which are there. Then we create the documentation of the controls accordingly. Okay, then we conduct the internal audit to make sure that we have actually fulfilled all the requirement of the standard or not. And then once everything is ready, we move at the last step, which is called as the certification audit. So this is basically a phased approach that companies should follow and actually follow while implementation of this standard actually. Yes.
okay. How does an organization perform a meaningful gap assessment?
So gap assessment basically should be done properly. Okay, because if you do not do gap assessment properly, it will become a very big issue. And how do you do that?
Hmm.
Is basically you start by reviewing all the existing documentation that the organization has. For example, what are the existing policies they have? What are the existing procedures, controls that they have already implemented? You can also interview the
Hmm.
main stakeholders. You can also interview the business owners. You can also interview the department heads. You can also score their compliance levels. Okay, whether they are fully met, partially met, or not met at all. Okay, then you can prioritize the gaps based upon the business impact. Okay, so this is how you go ahead. And basically you know, this gap assessment, it should not be a one time report. If an organization is actually, you know, trying to fill the gaps, they should do it periodically. Okay, the gap assessment has to be done at a periodical level. It should not be a one time exercise. Okay, and then you're done that, because there might be some more gaps that arise in the future. Okay, so you need to keep on doing this.
Can you share a example for this?
Yeah, definitely. So let's say a cloud based vendor, okay, realized you know, that they have a lot of firewalls. Okay, they have a lot of proper firewalls, proper encryption, but they did not have any proper incident response procedure in place. Okay, so this is a very big gap. They do have the infrastructure, right? They do have the infrastructure, they do have the technical controls, but without a incident response plan, how would you actually respond to an incident? So this is a big gap, right? So that is where organizations start to think now.
Okay. Any pitfall or a downfall is it have that you would
So,
share?
so as I said, it has to be performed properly. You have to review all the existing documentation. You have to review all the existing reports that they have. If you are not reviewing them thoroughly, again, it will become a very big issue for the organization.
Okay. My next question is why should be included in ISMS scope and boundaries? What should be included?
So scope is very important. Okay, because scope
Hmm.
defines the area of the implementation. Okay, Scope defines what is inside the ISO 27001 ISMS framework and what is outside the ISO 27001 ISMS framework, right? So scope is really important. Okay, so scope can be an entire organization, scope can be a particular location, scope can be a particular department, scope can be a particular service, scope can be a particular process, scope can be a particular product. So scope has to be defined properly. Okay, so if the scope is not defined properly, okay, it becomes a very big issue. Okay, so
Mm.
what normally organizations do, they only define it for one of their departments. Okay, let's say
Mm.
their IT department. They actually narrow the scope very down to a particular department only. This should not be done actually. Okay, because IT is not your business process. You are actually ignoring all the business processes that you have. And if your business processes are not protected, what is the use of ISO 27001, right? So that is where this is the very biggest pitfall that
Huh.
I see happening in this case. And so yeah, you have to basically make sure, whatever is impacting your business objectives, same has to be considered in the scope of the ISMS. Okay, whatever departments are there, whatever products are there, whatever services are there, if your business is driven because of those you have to consider in the scope of the ISMS.
What's the role of risk assessment in ISO 27001?
Risk assessment is one of the basic fundamental core of ISO 27001. We can say, Vidya, it's the heart of ISO 27001, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you identify information, you identify assets, you identify all the associated threats and vulnerabilities with the assets, you identify the probability and impact of the threats and vulnerabilities, you assign risk scoring, you assign risk levels, all that is there, and then accordingly you identify what are the annex A controls for the mitigation. Everything is there in the risk assessment process, right? So yeah,
Okay.
so basically a common mistake that I see organizations doing here, they try to copy the risk from internet. अभी का
Acha.
गूगल से देखा, कुछ भी कॉपी कर लिया, ओ ये तो रिसर्च रजिस्टर बन गया मेरा. बट इट इज नॉट लाइक दैट.
Okay.
सी, योर रिस्क आर योर ऑर्गेनाइजेशनल रिस्क. Why are you copying somebody else's risk? These are not your risk,
True.
right? Yeah, so people actually do this very often. They try to complete the documentation quickly. Some of the people I've seen, they don't have any idea how to perform the risk assessment at all, how to perform risk management at all. So I would say, if you really don't know, please come to us at Cyber GRC. Please comment on this podcast if you want to learn how to implement risk management properly. Because see, if your risk assessment is wrong, there is no point even implementing ISO 27001, even if you get certified. Let me be very honest there. Okay, because risk assessment has to be done properly. If the risk assessment is wrong, you are not protected basically, right? That is the main thing. Risk assessment is protecting you as an organization. That is the core. And I see a lot of mistakes there, here and there, people are making in the risk assessment. So yeah, so please be very careful. Whoever is watching this podcast, at least after watching this podcast, do not copy paste the risk from here and there.
Next, I want you to share what are those some must-have documents before the certification audit.
So it's a very good question. What are the most important documents that we need to have before the certification audit? See, first of all the documentation regarding the clauses have to be present. Okay. For example, clause number 4.1 to clause number 10.2, all the clauses we need to be ready with, because if any of the clauses documentation is missing, it will become a very big issue. Okay. And for example, ISMS policy document, scope document, risk assessment and risk treatment plan, statement of applicability, information security objectives, access control policy, incident management procedure, asset management register, asset register itself. Okay, internal audit report, management review
Mm.
reporting, training and awareness records. These are the basic documentation that has to be present. Okay, so what I see again as a pitfall in this case, a gap, Vidya, which I have seen. What people do for the documentation is basically they put everything nicely on the policy. Like you will be amazed to see the
Hmm.
policy document, but if you see the reality, the policy is not implemented on the ground. So this is again one of the
Acha.
major pitfalls that I have seen. Yes, because see, when the
Okay.
auditors will come, the auditors will cross check the reference also, right? They will check the evidence also. So when they will check the meeting minutes, they will check the logs, and they will check the reality. They will ask the users whether users have attended the trainings or not. They quickly come to know that it's only written and documented, but not implemented on the ground. So again, it becomes a major issue. So please, if anybody is watching, do not create the documentation only for the sake of creating documentation. You do it so that you get benefit out of it. Okay, so that you can actually implement it in your organization. If you are not implementing, if you are only filling a piece of paper, I don't think it's of any use actually.
Okay, so when we just started this podcast today, I asked you about stages of this, this process. So my next question is, ki, what's the difference between stage 1 and stage 2 audits?
It's a good question, Vidya, because audit happens in two stages. It's stage one audit, which is called as a documentation review, where the auditor will come at your organization or remotely, and they will check whether all the mandatory documentation, like we already discussed, is present or not.
Yeah.
Okay, they check that. The stage one audit is also called as a documentation review audit. Okay,
Okay.
and in the stage two audit, once you clear the stage one audit, let me be very clear. Okay, once you clear the stage one audit, then you can go to stage two audit. If your stage one fails, then there is no stage two audit. Okay, that is again one important thing to note. So only if the stage one clears and your documentation is basically correct, only then you go for the stage two audit. So when the stage two audit happens, then okay, then you go for
Hmm.
an implementation review. Okay, verify that the system actually works. Verify that the policy document, that the documentation that you have created have works. You verify it by checking the records, checking the evidences. All this basically checked in the stage two audit. Okay, so in the stage one, for example, an auditor will check for the incident response policy. Okay, and then in the stage two, they will ask, okay, show me how you manage the last incident. That is the difference between stage one and stage two. Okay, so a common pitfall that I have seen in this case, again for this particular stage one and stage two, Vidya, is basically documentation, as I mentioned, are only created for the sake of creating the documentation, but on the reality, there is nothing which matches those documentations. So that is where it becomes a very big issue in the stage two, actually, not in the stage one, because you're able to clear the stage two, but you're not able to clear the stage two. Okay.
Are the most common conformities found during audits?
Before that, we have a question also.
I'm sorry,
Before that, we
what
have a question
question?
also. You're not able to see the screen,
I didn't
Vidya.
observe. I'm sorry.
Let
Yeah.
me try to show the screen again. Wait, are you able to see the screen now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
How do you audit access control policy?
Yeah, so this is the question somebody is asking from LinkedIn. How do you audit the access control policy? Okay, so access control policy audit happens when you actually review whatever evidence that you have from a access control perspective. For example, do you have the access request form from the user? Do you have the
Hmm.
approval emails or not? Do you have the access logs or not? Do you have the user termination checklist or not? Do you have periodic access review or not? Those are also called as user access reviews. So this is how you review a access control policy. Okay, yeah, Vidya, you go on with the question.
Yeah. So my question was, what are the most common non-conformities found during audits?
Most common non-conformities found during audits. I've already prepared this for you, where you see all the common non-conformities. Okay, these are from a clause perspective. So anybody watching, from clause number 4.1 to 10.2, these are the most commonly found gaps that you are able to see on the screen. Okay, these are the gaps. You can take a screenshot also if you want. Basically, not having ISMS policy, not having defined roles and responsibilities, not having proper risk assessment, monitoring and measurement KPIs are absent, internal audit not effective, done, and information lifecycle not managed, information classification not managed. Organization controls are not followed, document controls are missing. So all these basically, Vidya, which you see on the screen, are basically the gaps, are the non-conformities. Okay, these are the gaps, and these are the gaps from the clauses perspective. I would also want people to see the gaps from a control perspective also. So these are some of the controls, Vidya, that you see on the screen, and these are
Hmm.
the gaps from the control perspective. Okay, only few of the controls I've mentioned here so that people get the idea. Okay, so you have incident and continuity related controls, policy and intelligence controls, access and suppliers, change and classification, personal security, and all the things which are deficient in these controls. Some of the controls that I have taken as a sample. So these are all the gaps. Okay, for access and
Okay.
monitoring, for example, you have uncontrolled privilege access and incomplete logging and monitoring. Like somebody asked for the access control policy, right? So the
Hmm.
last one is their access and monitoring. So yeah, so all these are gaps. Basically all these are basically the areas where we need to look at. These are called non-conformities during the audits. Okay, so this is what it is. Yes.
Okay, so what after the certification? What comes next?
This is a very good question that you ask. Nobody actually asked this question before. What happens after the certification? So basically, the journey actually starts after the certification, because after the certification, what happens is that every year you will have a surveillance audit. It will keep on happening every year. Okay. So the certification is valid for 3 years, and after every year you have the surveillance audit. So once you have the surveillance audit, okay, you need to pass the surveillance audit also. If you are not passing the surveillance audit, again your certificate will be revoked. So in the surveillance audit, they basically check whether you are effectively managing the ISMS or not, whether you are continuously improving the ISMS or not, whether you are
Hmm.
properly working on the policies and procedures that you have defined, or was it only on paperwork. All those things they actually check in the surveillance audit. Okay, and this is one of the most important thing that people have to remember after the certification is achieved. And in order to do that, you need to have proper periodic risk assessment. It is very important. Okay, you can do it monthly, you can do it quarterly, you can do it half yearly, but has to be done. That is very important depending upon the organization. Okay, and keep the policies updated. For example, if any new threat comes, if any new incident happens, if any new law comes to your your country, your area where you are located, keep updating the policies according to that. Don't leave the policies like you just updated them 7 months back and they are just there, hanging around somewhere. It should not be the case. Okay, your documentation should be updated. And keep management involved, keep the leadership in the loop, ask them for approvals for the things that you want to implement from a ISMS perspective, and keep a log of all those emails, keep a log of all those minutes of the meeting, because that is again very important from a continual improvement perspective. Okay, so only having a certification is not important. I would say managing the ISMS and improving the ISMS over a period of time is something that the organization should look forward to. Okay,
Okay. At the end of this podcast, what advice you would like to give to our listeners?
I would say don't go after the certifications. Like organizations say, I want to be ISO 27001 certified. I wouldn't recommend that immediately. What I would say, you implement the standard properly, you take your time, you understand what the standard is all about, you prepare your employees, you train them, you make them aware, and you go gradually. Once you have a complete understanding about the standard, once you know how the standard helps you in your business, once you have clarity, and once you have implemented at least few of the policies, few of the procedures, you understand how risk assessment works, you understand how gap assessment works, you understand how to do scoping and all, only then you go for the certification. Right now I see organizations, they just want the certification in 2 days. Do not do that. It is not a
Hmm.
purpose of getting a piece of paper. The purpose is
Hmm.
not
True.
getting a certificate here. Purpose is safeguarding the organization, safeguarding the assets, safeguarding the information that you have, right? So that is the purpose here. Okay, so this is one of the most important things I would like to tell who is anybody who is watching. Okay, so yeah, Vidya, are you there? I think we have lost Vidya. Let us wait for a minute. If she comes, it's fine. Otherwise, we have to close the podcast. Hi, Vidya.
Hi. Uh, okay, my laptop I think is still connected.
It's okay. It's okay. No issues. Are
Yeah.
you back now?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Mm.
basically, yeah. I think you covered all the questions, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think one question from LinkedIn has come. Godson
Huh.
is there. Yeah. Go ahead, Vidya.
What are the likely snags encountered in bridging the implementation gap identified?
So, Godson, first of all, thank you so much for watching this podcast, and thank you so much for spending the time and asking questions here. We appreciate you, being upfront and asking these questions because Vidya, many people have questions, but it takes courage for somebody to actually type the question and ask that. So, Godson, thank you so much for doing that first of all, and I appreciate your, you coming up and asking the question upfront. Okay, thank you so much for that. So there are many snags actually that we encounter during the implementation, but the biggest snag that I have seen in the implementation is basically not having proper leadership support. This is one of the biggest snag. Okay, and this will basically derail the entire ISO 27001 implementation because leadership gets committed initially. When they want the certification, they are
Hmm.
there with you, okay, because they want it for the business. But when the project actually starts, okay, when you actually do the groundwork, when you create the policies,
Hmm.
procedures, when you do the risk assessment, then slowly and gradually, because see, the business is more focused towards business, right? Their end goal is to have business running. The show has to run. That is their end goal. So that is where
Yeah.
I see the interest dropping actually. That is where I see
Hmm.
the stakeholders now more concerned about the certification date rather than how
Okay.
you are doing it, rather than what are the issues that you are facing, rather than are you getting the proper support or not, rather than what else we can do to make this journey easier for our organization. So that is where I think sometimes there is a very big lag, because I don't blame the leadership for that, because again, this is not their job. But at the end of the day, see, ISO also says that very clearly in the clause number 5, that leadership has to be there. Okay, so leadership support is really important. Okay, that is where clause 5 comes into play. So that is where I think it's a biggest snag that I have seen, I have observed, that initially everybody is very excited, but afterwards, when the time passes, when then the real work starts, then slowly and gradually you see the interest dropping. That this is, I think, one of the uh, biggest things.
Okay. Srinath is asking, what if a new startup wants to have ISMS implemented for future ISO cert? Please suggest how can it start and things to keep in mind to effectively have ISMS implemented.
So, Srikant, very good question. So, this is what I was just telling Vidya, that an organization wants to implement ISO, but they don't want to get the
Hmm.
certification. They want to get the certification in the future,
Hmm.
right? So, Srikant, this
Yeah.
is how you need to start. So, it's a very good question. Excellent question that he is asking now. You need to start with gap assessment. Okay. Start understanding what is the standard requirement now. Okay. I know you don't want to go for
Hmm.
the certification. It is completely fine. But at the end of the day, someday you will have to go for it, right? And you need a baseline also to know where to start from, right? From both the perspective, you start from the gap assessment. Okay. You understand what is the current security posture of the organization. Where does the organization stand currently? What all policies, procedures, controls, documentation that you already have defined, assess that. And also assess, Srikant, whether they are correct or not, right? Accordingly, you make a decision. How much time it will take to implement the standard, how many people you need, how many resources you need. As per the scope of the project, of the organization, you basically go ahead and do that. Okay? This is how you need to start. And once you know the gaps, once you know the areas that you need to create upon, then you start creating the policies, procedures, all the documentation surrounding that. Again, this is a time taking process. It is not a 1 or 2 days job. It will take time, but yes, this is how you basically start the process.
Okay. Thank you so much everyone. It was really fun. और आज तो काफी सारा इंटरेक्शन भी हुआ. I wish ये इंटरेक्शन
Right,
रोज बना रहे. And
right.
yeah, we'll see you guys tomorrow with some more interesting topics ahead.
Sure. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Vidya. Thank you, everyone.